Reggie here, your friendly neighborhood bodybuilder and comic book collector, and I want to welcome you to another one of my videos. This video is another installment of an ongoing series that I've been doing in which we run down the top 10 most submitted books into CGC. And as a reminder, I actually get this data directly from CGC. So what you'll be looking at are books that come from them that have yet to be entered into the database. So in many ways, this is a leading indicator of what is to come. Before we get to the May list, I actually want to take a moment to acknowledge the sponsor of this video, Hip Comic. I was actually on Hip Comic's website just the other day, spotted a really solid copy of Amazing Spider-Man issue number 110, the first appearance of the Gibbon, so you know that I had to have that. But it also has to be mentioned that Hip Comic's website is a great place to buy and sell comics, as evidence of Amazing Spider-Man issue number 110 being right there. If you haven't yet checked them out, I definitely want to encourage you to do so. There is a link in the description of this video. I should also mention that not only do they have regular comic book sales, but they have auctions as well. Check it out. Every single month that we do this list, there are a couple of surprise books, and this month is no different from that. There are several that surprise me. There's also a couple on here that consistently remain on the list, so we'll run through those as well. But I do want to encourage you to stay tuned until the end because there are a couple of bonus books that I will mention to you. Number 10 on the list is X-Men issue number 4 from the Jonathan Hickman run on the X-Men. And this one honestly is a little bit of a head scratcher because this book doesn't have a lot going for it. Yes, it is arguably one of the best villain monologues ever. If you haven't read this thing, read it because Magneto's dinner speech is the thing of legends. It really is. But outside of that, I really don't know what else makes this book significant enough to warrant it making the list. But here it is. And when you dig into the sales data and also the census data, there isn't much there. There isn't much of either of those things when you look for it. So this is one that we're going to have to keep our eyes open for in the future to see whether this book continues to be submitted in and whether something happens out there that gives a little bit of context as to why this one made the list. Number 9 on the list is Amazing Spider-Man issue number 361. And this book has actually been on the list since we started this series many months ago. This first appearance of Carnage actually has 20,000 copies on the CGC census, with more than 12,000 of them being graded either a 9.6 or a 9.8. What's interesting is that there are actually a couple of 9.9s on the list. I was actually a little surprised by this, both that they were there and at the same time that the number was relatively low. At present, there are only 4 9.9s on the CGC census. The 9.8 has an FMV of around $1,350, but is currently selling for less. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this book pending the Venom movie that's going to be coming out. Whether this book will stay on the list, whether its value will go up, it's going to be something that we're going to have to keep our eye on. Number 8 on the list is Harley Quinn issue number 1. And I think this is the first time that we've seen a Harley Quinn related book on the list. And this one too is a little bit of a head scratcher because there isn't much in the way of sales or census data for this book. From what I can tell, this is the first appearance of Harley Quinn's buddy Kevin and also the debut of her new costume. But outside of that, there isn't much there. And again, we're going to have to keep our eyes open to see whether this book stays on the list long term or whether it falls off next month. Number 7 on the list is Amazing Spider-Man issue number 55. And I will tell you that I am surprised that this book is still on the list. I thought by now this book would have come and gone, but clearly I was wrong. And the current thinking right now is that This book's presence on the list is still being fueled by all of the variant covers that were released after the initial cover came out. And so that is why I guess the book is actually still on the list. At present, the CGC database is showing roughly 2,400 copies of this book have been graded, with a healthy number of them being 9.8s. And at present, the 9.8 actually has an FMV of $90. I've said this before that I am keeping my eyes open to see whether Black Panther issue number 25, also by Patrick Gleason, makes the list in the upcoming months. I actually have a few copies sitting off to my left that I have not sent in to CGC, but it'll be interesting to see if others have. Number 6 on the list is Something is Killing the Children, issue number 1 from Boom Studios. This book has been no higher than 6th on the list, yet continues to hang around month after month. Cover A roughly has 1,400 total copies on the census, with about 80% of them being a 9.8. I'll tell you that I personally like the Jenny Frison covers. And there's a couple of versions of them out there, but they're all essentially the same. And when you dig into the data, what you see is that the main cover for Jenny Frison has roughly the same number of graded copies on the census as cover A. Both of these covers are going for more than FMV at present, but the Jenny cover might actually represent the better buy. And I say that because that book is selling for $412 versus cover A, which is routinely going for more than $1,100 against an FMV of $675. Again, both awesome books. Both have roughly the same number of graded copies on the census, roughly the same number of 9.8s. One of them is going for less than $500. The other is going for upwards of $1,100. And again, Jenny Frison is pretty awesome as a creator. Number 5 on the list is Alien 1. And this is a book, honestly, that I'm surprised to see on the list. I read the book, wasn't that good, so I'm a little surprised. But admittedly, the cover for A is pretty awesome. And that's probably why this book is actually being submitted in to be graded, because of that gorgeous black cover. At present, there are roughly 100 copies of this book on the census, split between a 9.8 and a 9.6. There actually isn't very much in the way of sales data for this book in GoCollect, but there is a single sale of a 9.6 that honestly isn't really worth mentioning. Now, with that said, it'll be interesting to see what happens as we move forward. Will we continue to see people submit this book in? Will we see additional sales start to pop up of 9.6s, 9.8s? Only time will tell. Number 4 on the list is Ultimate Fallout number 4, the first appearance of Miles Morales. And I have to smile whenever I talk about this book because it continues to show up on the list month after month. I'm honestly not sure where people continue to find copies of this book, but they do. In fact, I actually took some time and added up the different print runs and the different covers that are out there, and there are roughly 15,000 graded copies of this book in the CGC census, with about 10,000 of them being the main cover A. Last month, I actually pointed to potentially some softening of sales with this book, maybe a new lower price being established, but because of some data lag issues, I'm unable to verify that, whether that's actually happening or not. But it's pretty safe to say that this book, this character, continued to remain incredibly popular because of its presence on this list. Stay tuned to see what happens next month with Miles Morales. Number 3 on the list is Carnage, Black, White, and Blood, issue number 1. And this is the first time that this book has appeared on the list. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that it is due to the Patrick Gleason cover that he did. I felt like this Gleason cover came out immediately on the heels of the one that he did for Amazing Spider-Man 55. And if memory serves, this book actually sold out relatively quickly when it was released on his website. At least that's what my memory tells me. I could be wrong about that, but I'm just going to go with what I remember for right now. At present, there isn't a ton of data out there for this book. I think there have only been a couple of sales and about 82 copies have actually been graded. Like some of the other books we've talked about, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this one as we move later into the summer. Number 2 on the list is Department of Truth issue number 1. And this book was in the number 1 spot last month, but has been pushed down the list by a Boom Studios book. When you dig into the data, what you see is that there are roughly 1,300 graded copies of cover A on the census, with 90% of them graded at a 9.8. The most recent sales data from June shows this book selling below its FMV of $160. I will also tell you that there are some pretty interesting and awesome covers out there for Department of Truth issue number 1 that have, I think, some lower print runs, lower representation on the CGC census, but also a higher FMV than what we see with cover A. And number 1 on the list is BRZRKR issue number 1. And I can tell you that this book did not surprise me in the least. And it didn't surprise me because this book was heavily printed and also had a ton of variants, including some amazing foil covers, which may or may not have found their way into my comic book room here. I don't know what to say. I am a collector from the 90s. I love some foil. A quick glance at GoCollect revealed roughly 28 variant covers for BRZRKR issue number 1. My guess is that there are a couple of others out there that I haven't seen yet. And to that point, we are probably going to see BRZRKR issue number 1 on the list for quite some time. The question will be, will it maintain its number 1 spot, or will somebody else bump it down the list? I want to say thanks again to my sponsor, Hip Comic. There is a link down in the description for you to check them out. And no, I have not forgotten about the bonus books. We're going to talk about 3 of them, and all 3 are related to spiders. The very first book is Silk issue number 1, and this book comes in at the 14th spot, and I'm not surprised by that, to be honest, because there are some gorgeous covers of this book out there, so not surprised that people are sending them in. In the 15th spot is Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man issue number 1, and this book consistently shows up on the list month after month after month, and will probably be on the list for several more months to come. And then the very last book is a Miles Morales book, specifically Miles Morales Spider-Man issue number 25. And this book is the first appearance of the Miles clone that may have some longevity. It's also a really awesome cover, and I'm guessing that's why people are sending this book in. With that, I'm going to wrap this up, and I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I hope that you enjoyed it, and if you did, I want to encourage you to hit the thumbs up button. If you need to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.